Tonight, the world braces for retaliation after the U.S. strikes Iran.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success.
3 nuclear sites bombed, but the extent of the damage unclear. Iran vows to retaliate.
There is no red line that they have not crossed.
We're at the Iranian border, the rush to get out, and the Canadians still stuck.
It's hard. I wish I was there with her.
The fears over what could come next.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
And if it does not, an ominous warning tonight from the U.S. president. It's time to make Iran great again.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hennemanzing.
A tense wait is underway tonight as the world watches to see how Iran might respond to U.S. attacks on its nuclear facilities. Iran says the U.S. crossed a red line, and Washington is fully responsible for whatever happens next. The U.S. bombings mark a significant escalation in the war started by Israel just over a week ago. The Americans had been calling for a diplomatic solution. Now they're warning Iran not to choose more violence. 3 key nuclear sites inside Iran were targeted by American stealth bombers, including the Fordo enrichment plant, hit with the uniquely powerful bunker buster bombs. We have a team of journalists here with us tonight from Washington to the Middle East and here in Canada to help assess what happened and what could come next. Let's begin in the U.S., where the Trump administration is claiming this a major military success. But as Katie Simpson lays out, it's getting pushback from both sides of the aisle.
American B-2 bombers returning from a high-stakes mission to strike Iran. The consequential order by U.S. President Donald Trump, who watched Operation Midnight Hammer unfold from the White House.
Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
American forces were essentially unchallenged, the U.S. says, as they struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Satellite images showing what the facilities looked like before and then after precision-guided weapons struck. This is the Fordo site, hidden deep beneath an Iranian mountain. Bunker buster bombs leaving behind holes, though it's difficult to assess the damage underground. Still, Trump has declared it a spectacular success.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Trump's allies argued this is a limited operation with specific goals.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program.
This mission was not and has not been about regime change.
This wasn't a regime change move. This was designed to degrade and/or destroy 3 nuclear sites related to their nuclear weaponization ambitions.
Arguments undermined by Trump, who posted, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" Trump is accused by some Democrats of not presenting enough evidence to justify the attack.
It's not an operation that should have ever been authorized by the president in the absence of intelligence showing that Iran had made the decision to break out and build a bomb.
Even some Republicans are frustrated too.
I'm here to represent the base of the MAGA party that got Trump elected. Most of us were tired of the wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and we were promised that we wouldn't be engaging in another one. Yet here we see this happening.
The U.S. is warning Iran not to retaliate, or else it says it will be hit even harder. The Americans insist the only path to peace on their terms is through a negotiated settlement.
And Iran's nuclear capabilities have long been a big concern for the United States. What more, Katie, is the White House saying about why it's acting now?
A couple of reasons. One, they say Iran had the materials necessary to make a nuclear weapon. Marco Rubio said that in itself is enough, while J.D. Vance accused the Iranians of stonewalling them during negotiations. Lawmakers will get a briefing on Capitol Hill this week. Republicans largely, not all of them, but largely support the decision, while Democrats are demanding more specifics about the why.
Katie Simpson in Washington. As Iran considers its response to that American attack, Iran's foreign minister is headed to Moscow to consult with allies there. And as Margaret Evans explains, the regime also took aim again at Israel.
Iran's initial reply arrived early this morning. Missiles aimed at Jerusalem, Haifa, and Tel Aviv, some making it through Israeli defenses, shattering residential buildings. Israeli citizens, well disciplined in getting to safety.
We got out of bed and we went to the safe room, heard a tremendous boom. When we came back, we saw our apartment was not our apartment anymore.
They want us destroyed, and we're not going to let it happen.
Israel's prime minister was quick to offer thanks and effusive praise to the U.S. president.
His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
This analyst says that's a big ask.
The American attempts to create a new Middle East in Iraq, in Afghanistan, all over, were a failure.
The more immediate question is how Iran will respond to the United States' entrance onto the playing field.
There is no red line that they have not crossed.
Iran's foreign minister says it will defend itself.
It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations.
In Tehran, still reeling from 10 days of blistering Israeli attacks, there was a show of defiance on the streets. It was unforgivable, says Farzaneh Mohakkek. They shouldn't think they can harm our country. Iran is stronger than they perceive. The regime has disputed U.S. President Donald Trump's claims that its nuclear facilities were completely destroyed. Some officials saying Iran moved its stockpiles of enriched uranium to a secret location some time ago. Iran has repeatedly said it would target U.S. interests if Washington were to enter the fray. There are some 40,000 U.S. troops stationed across the Middle East. But that would no doubt draw more fire from Washington, and Iran's regime leaders will be calculating the potential cost of that. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
With Iran's airspace closed, its internet mostly blacked out, people are plunged into the most dangerous moment in decades. Many are scrambling to cross the border. Briar Stewart met some of them as they made their escape into Turkey.
The final leg of a journey out of Iran. For many of those crossing into Turkey, their exodus began more than 800 kilometers to the southeast in Tehran.
I saw explosion in front of my home, and it was terrible.
This 25-year-old is on his way to Toronto after receiving a Canadian work visa. He didn't want us to reveal his name because he feared he could be targeted by Iran's long-ruling regime.
Most of people just want to live in peace, without any problems and without any fight.
Instead, many are now on the move. Getting out of the country brought some a sense of relief, particularly because of the looming risk that the war could escalate further.
This morning I woke up and I read the news about the U.S. bombing the sites, so that was it for me, so I decided to leave.
Shwan Ghazi said he decided to cut his family visit short because he didn't want to risk the land borders closing.
This is just one of the border crossing points into Turkey, but Iranians are also making the trek into Armenia and Azerbaijan. Canadian officials say they're stepping up consular assistance to help Canadians out of the area while the airspace is closed.
But for all those Iranians leaving, others are returning home, back to families that they've struggled to reach because of widespread internet blackouts. Ali Sadra Souf went on vacation just before Israel started its airstrikes.
I hope everything gets resolved, and obviously the regime is harmful to the region.
A very bold statement by someone headed back into Iran at a time when the country promises retaliation, which could risk an even wider conflict. Briar Stewart, CBC News, along the border between Turkey and Iran.
Commercial flights out of Israel are expected to resume on Monday. That will mark 10 days since the country grounded departures as it began airstrikes on Iran, stranding about 40,000 tourists. The initial flights will be limited to 50 passengers each. Many Iranian Canadians are desperate to contact family and friends unable to leave the country. Yasmin Ganea shows us what people here are going through.
Emotions are high for Sana Safa, who hasn't been able to speak with her mother in Iran for 4 days.
It's hard. I wish I was there with her.
Safa's mother, a dual citizen of Canada and Iran, was visiting her sick mother before the Israel-Iran war and the U.S. attack. Safa says trying to get her mother out through a land border is too dangerous.
She's waiting it out at the moment. We have registered her online to say that she's outside the country. But other than that, there's not much that we can do.
A sense of helplessness as Iranian Canadians grapple with the conflict from afar.
And we have to put a smile on our face every day as we're meeting other people. And it's difficult because all you want to do is say, I'm worried. And you can't.
Stop the U.S. war machine!
Viva, viva Iran! In Toronto, hundreds are calling for peace in Iran.
I think people on the ground are really suffering already, and I think it's ridiculous to continue inciting more violence in the Middle East.
I don't want any more innocent people to be killed. There is no reason for the U.S. to enter this war.
Others say while they oppose the war, they want an end to the Islamist regime.
This war, as painful as it might be, might present an opportunity to finish the job that the Iranian people have started decades ago.
As for Safa, she hopes she can speak to her mom soon.
What would you like to say to her right now? I just want to say that I love her.
Wishing for her safe return amid an unpredictable conflict. Yasmin Ganea, CBC News, Vancouver.
People also took to the streets in several U.S. cities to protest the Trump administration's actions.
Use your voice, take a stand. No war on Iran.
Hundreds flooded into New York's Times Square, many drawing parallels to the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. Hundreds of anti-war protesters marched in Los Angeles. Some gathered in front of the White House in Washington and in downtown Boston. Paul Hunter joins us from Washington. And Paul, for days, Donald Trump appeared to be hesitant to bomb Iran. What changed?
Yeah, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today declined to give a precise answer to that very question, Ian, saying only that there came a moment in time when the president realized this action needed to be taken. Look, it was just 2 days ago the president suggested a 2-week window for negotiations, but Hegseth also hinted that Trump had become frustrated with Iran's signals that talks would go nowhere, so the thinking now is that that 2-week window was a decoy to boost the surprise factor. Vice President J.D. Vance did say today Trump retained the ability to call it all off at the last minute if he chose to. He did not.
This is not necessarily a popular decision for Trump, and that certainly includes his MAGA base.
Yeah, it sure isn't. And so regarding support for Trump on this, all eyes are on what happens next. If Iran retaliates, as many expect, Trump has already made clear the U.S. will retaliate in return bigger and more fiercely. A large majority of Americans, including in his MAGA base, have indeed long made clear they want no part of foreign wars. Now Trump has put them into one. But if this is a one-off and the U.S. isn't dragged into something bigger and bloodier, then he may well emerge a hero again among his supporters. If it's the opposite and the U.S. finds itself mired in another long war, Trump may well find trouble at home, Ian.
Thanks, Paul. The United Nations Security Council is now mulling a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire.
We cannot and must not give up on peace.
The resolution hasn't come to a vote, but there are early indications the U.S. will veto it. The head of the UN's atomic watchdog also addressed the council, saying no radiation had been detected outside the sites hit last night, but that no one knows the extent of the damage at Iran's Fordo nuclear facility. That's just one of the uncertainties the U.S., the region, and the world now face. Last night's bombing could be just the beginning. David Common shows us Iran's options.
Only the American military could have struck halfway around the world on a target buried deep inside a mountain. But it's still too early to know how much these strikes damaged Iran's nuclear program.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success.
Early images show the impact sites, 6 holes where the massive ordnance penetrator bomb entered the earth, creating a deep shaft towards the underground target, leading to an enormous explosion. Before and after images show how dust and sand now cover the hills and buildings, but even spy satellites cannot show what's happened below ground. In short, we cannot see the level of damage inside those deeply buried nuclear enrichment halls, nor can we see if the Iranians had already moved some of that nuclear fuel and associated equipment to other locations.
If we believe the initial damage assessments from the administration, the facilities have been destroyed, and so this is the end of it from the United States point of view. And so it's really up to Iran whether they want to keep fighting.
While Iran has a large military force, it cannot win a conventional battle against the U.S. It may not retaliate, but if it does, it likely won't be with soldiers like these. The Iranians could use proxies to attack unarmed American-owned oil tankers off their coast in the Strait of Hormuz, or through the Persian Gulf, even as far away as the Red Sea. Iran also has one of the world's most sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities. They could use that to try to take down some of the U.S. energy grid or to target an American company's website or internal systems. The CIA has also previously warned of Iranian sleeper cells in the U.S. who could embark on a terrorism campaign.
Iran has been trying for many, many years to come after former senior government officials and other Americans here inside our country. They've actually taken assassination efforts.
Anything Iran does could prompt an American retaliation, demonstrating just how easy it is for wars to start and how hard it is for them to stop. David Common, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is calling for a diplomatic solution, saying in a statement, Canada has been consistently clear that Iran can never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. While U.S. military action taken last night was designed to alleviate that threat, the situation in the Middle East remains highly volatile. He called on parties to return immediately to the negotiating table. And tonight, Carney is in Brussels, set to discuss international security at a NATO summit. Kate McKenna shows us how developments in the Middle East now add even more urgency to the agenda.
Do you agree with the Americans' decision to bomb Iran, sir?
The Prime Minister not speaking before boarding his flight to Europe for long-planned meetings with world leaders on defense. Summits that will now need to meet the moment as the United States inserts itself into the Israel-Iran war.
We want to see a resolution to this issue. We want to see the negotiations resume, and we want to see peace.
Canada has always been of the position that the Iran nuclear program is a threat to international security. The U.S. took these actions, I think, in trying to address that threat.
Security is why Mark Carney is in Europe. On Monday, he's expected to sign a new agreement with the EU. Later, he'll meet NATO leaders. This expert says these are strategic meetings.
The goal for Canada at the EU-Canada summit is to cement its relationship with European partners, both for defense and for investment in the Canadian economy. It goes two ways. The role in NATO, make people understand we are on the way to meeting our obligations.
Canada's new security deal with the EU should make it easier and cheaper to buy some weapons and ammunition.
That has been our Achilles heel since almost forever, I would say, in terms of getting the equipment.
At the NATO summit, expect agreement from allies to boost defense spending from 2% of GDP to an eye-watering 5%. Timeline to come.
It is important because we have to protect ourselves against our adversaries, so like Russia, but also China, which is increasingly building up its armed forces. So we have to make sure we have what we need to defend ourselves.
All of this is part of Mark Carney's goal, to rely less on the United States for trade and security while building on relationships with other allies in a world that's changing very quickly. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Brussels.
As politicians argue Trump went beyond his executive powers, some legal experts say that will be hard to prove.
He's making a claim based on practices that have gone on for several decades now.
How the actions of previous presidents may have paved the way for this operation. But first, a dangerous heat event takes hold in parts of Canada.
I was like, can I have a cup of ice? I need to just put it everywhere.
How long it could last, and the steps you can take to keep loved ones safe.
This type of heat alerts are a public health emergency.
We're back in 2. A search resumed today for 4 people on board a helicopter that crashed into a lake in northeastern Quebec. It happened Friday night, shortly after takeoff, during a medical evacuation. The helicopter is operated by Air Medic. The company says a 5th person managed to escape with injuries that are not life-threatening. Millions of people in Canada and the U.S. are dealing with dangerously hot, humid temperatures tonight. Parts of Ontario, Quebec, and several states are under extreme heat warnings. And as Jennifer Yoon explains, it's expected to last for days.
Scorching, sweaty, and punishingly humid. It's the first taste of extreme heat this summer.
Things are sweating that shouldn't be sweating. I was like, can I have a cup of ice? I need to just put it everywhere.
And people in Toronto are doing whatever they can to cope.
Try to sweat as soon as possible. Cools me down.
It's gross, but it's so hot, I'll go in the gross water.
The blistering heat and humidity hitting through parts of Ontario and southern Quebec for the next few days, with the humidex feeling like up to 45 during the day and little relief at night.
It is kind of exceptional by its intensity. We are pretty much in the 2% of the maximum temperature we can see climatologically at this period of year.
Quebec giving schools the green light to close for the day Monday, while in Ottawa, people are bracing for the humidity to intensify. The same weather system is sizzling parts of the eastern United States right now.
I need you to take this seriously.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared a state of emergency in several counties, while in Chicago, city workers opened cooling centers, hoping to avoid the worst-case scenario.
Over the last 3 years, we have recorded 485 heat-related deaths.
Concrete and asphalt trap the heat, boosting temperatures even higher and magnifying health risks.
For cities, this type of heat alerts are just not discomfort. It's actually public health emergency.
Environment Canada asking Canadians to watch out for signs of heat stroke, like red and hot skin, nausea, and dizziness. Drink plenty of water and check in on vulnerable neighbors.
Plan your activity according to that kind of heat.
For those baking in this heat, the good news is that relief is on the way. By Wednesday, meteorologists expect a cool front to roll in, pulling temperatures back to normal. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Former cabinet minister and longtime Ontario Liberal MP John McCallum has died. McCallum was first elected in 2000. He held several cabinet positions over his nearly 2 decades in politics. He also served as ambassador to China. McCallum resigned from that post after suggesting Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou had strong arguments to fight extradition to the U.S. A statement from McCallum's family said he died peacefully yesterday at the age of 75. Back in the U.S., experts are weighing in as some lawmakers challenge Trump's bombing of Iran.
In the modern era, presidents have claimed the ability to attack other countries without prior congressional authorization.
The heated debate over whether these strikes were an act of war. Plus, the weapons in Iran's arsenal if it chooses to strike back.
In the next week or 2, we're going to see a carefully calibrated response.
The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. Iranian Canadians fearful for the fate of relatives trapped in a war zone after U.S. missile strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear sites.
Can I see my dad again? Can I hug him again? I don't know.
The fight to get an elderly parent to Canada and safety. But first, Questions swirl about the legality of Donald Trump's Iran strikes and whether he had the authority to do it.
This was not constitutional, was not lawful in the absence of a declaration by Congress.
Unconstitutional, but not unprecedented. Eli Glasner explores whether congressional approval was needed and the precedents Trump may use to defend the bombings.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
After the shock of the surprise military maneuver, President Trump is pushing for peace. But some politicians on both sides say the action was an act of war. Just moments after learning of the attack, Senator Bernie Sanders didn't hold back.
But it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez echoed Sanders, calling the attack a grave violation and clearly grounds for impeachment. And from Republican Thomas Massie,
I think this was a bad move politically, but it's also just a bad move legally and constitutionally.
So is bombing nuclear strongholds and firing cruise missiles an act of war? Well, it depends who you ask. Does the president have the authority to attack Iran? Sai Krishna Prakash is a constitutional law professor.
Under the U.S. Constitution, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but Congress has the power to declare war.
That's in Section 8 of the Constitution, and it's pretty simple. The Congress shall have power, among other things, to declare war. But does the act of bombing count as war?
Most nations in the 18th century declared war just by starting it. And if you started a war, you had declared it. And that was how they understood the Constitution, so that Congress had to decide first whether we were going to engage in war.
But Trump is counting on the actions of past presidents.
In the modern era, for the last 60 or 70 years, presidents have claimed the ability to attack other countries without prior congressional authorization.
So he's protected, I guess, by precedent?
I wouldn't say he's protected. He's making a claim based on practices that have gone on for several decades now.
He says many presidents asserted their power to act without congressional approval.
It's been done by previous presidents, most recently Barack Obama, when he attacked Libya.
We struck regime forces approaching Benghazi to save that city and the people within it.
In 2011, Obama told Americans the United States had a responsibility to act after a crackdown by the forces of Muammar Gaddafi. NATO eventually joined the airstrikes, which lasted over 7 months. The power of the president even saw Harry S. Truman initiate what became the Korean War, which led to over 1 million deaths, but began as a police action. But there's another law that could limit Trump's actions. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 limits military action to 60 or 90 days without congressional approval.
The problem with that is that Barack Obama bombed Libya for more than 90 days. And his claim was that we weren't engaged in hostilities when we bombed Libya.
So it was another red line, it was another guardrail, and they just sailed past it.
They sailed past it.
He says even though many in Congress may share reservations about what has begun in Iran, Trump is clearly in control.
You know, when you have a united executive branch, which is often the case in a divided Congress, the president wins.
So, Eli, when it comes to military action, the president seems to have the advantage here.
Undoubtedly. He has the support of most of the Republicans, even though we are seeing that splintering in some of the MAGA base. So the president can initiate an attack as the commander-in-chief without bringing it to Congress. But if there are reprisals against American forces from Iran, then America is at war. And according to experts, congressional approval is not required. But what is really key to much of this is that perceived low risk to American troops. If we start to see serious casualties, that changes the conversation dramatically.
Eli Glasner in Toronto. Thanks. Let's bring in the founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, Janice Stein. And Janice, as more details emerge about what happened last night, what is your assessment of the U.S. attack?
two big takeaways here, Ian. There's not a leader in the Middle East who is not paying attention to the capacity of the United States to execute. In the Middle East, that really matters. The second quite paradoxical takeaway is it's entirely unclear what has happened to that 400 kilogram stockpile of Iranian enriched uranium. As the day went on, it becomes more and more likely that the Iranians were able to move it before, or a big part of it, before the attack began. We just don't know.
We had a pretty vigorous debate on Cross Country Checkup this afternoon on CBC Radio about how real was Iran's threat of making nuclear weapons. How imminent was it? Do you have a sense of where they were at?
So it depends what we mean by imminent, but there is a bigger picture here. In no other country in the world who has a civilian nuclear program is enriching consistently to the 60% level. The distance between 60% and 90% is just a sprint. Why do it and persist in doing it year after year and accumulating a stockpile if you are only interested in a civilian program?
There are so many questions about almost everything surrounding this attack. So first of all, in terms of the impact that it's had on Iran and on its nuclear facilities, I guess the answer to that is right now we don't know how successful that was.
We don't know where the fuel is, and inspectors are not on the ground. We do know that some of the facilities which convert enriched uranium to metal and back into highly enriched fuel have been damaged, but we really don't know yet, Ian. We need people on the ground, and they're not there.
In terms of next steps, again, I don't think there's any way for us to predict what Iran is going to do, but what would your educated guess be?
My sense is that in the next week or two, we're going to see a carefully calibrated response. In other words, you have to respond, there's no question, but not one that is going to push the United States hard to retaliate. That's the short term. The medium term, that is an entirely different question. The knowledge of how to enrich uranium is still in Iran. Very likely there is a stockpile in Iran. Iran is humiliated right now. It's very possible that they will, in fact, go faster than they were going before.
And what about our actions that Iran could take against the United States or other countries, but particularly the United States in terms of, I've heard talk about, cyber attacks?
There's certainly a broad range of cyber options, but the United States has very good cyber retaliatory capacity, but that any cyber attack would still not heat this up. An attack on a US base, then they've largely evacuated many of the forces. That would satisfy the need to show you're doing something. It wouldn't push it over the edge. At the other end, close the Straits of Hormuz, which would hurt Iran as much as everybody else, but it would hurt everybody else.
So as we've heard, Trump has promised, swift, precise, strong reaction if the U.S. is attacked in any way by Iran. That aside for a moment, if there's not an attack on U.S. bases or anything else American, do you think that the Americans would escalate anyway?
No, I do not. Let's look at the president. He hates forever wars. Part of him really didn't want to do this until he was, I think, his judgment changed because of the success of the operation by Israel. This is not a president who wants to escalate and prolong a war.
And he has his complicated domestic politics to think about. So let me finish with this. As of tonight, from any perspective, whether it's geopolitics or domestic politics, do you think the United States will look at this as a success?
Yes, I do, because their military show that they can do something that no military in the world can do. Now, if there's tremendous blowback, people will look at this from the perspective of history and think, no, that wasn't a success. But until and unless that happens, they will.
Always nice having your analysis, Janice. Janice Stein, the founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Reaching people in Iran has become increasingly difficult, leaving Canadians with loved ones in the region uncertain of their future.
Can I see my dad again? Can I hug him again? I don't know.
A Canadian shares her story as her 72-year-old father remains in a war zone. As Iran weighs its response to the U.S. attacks, many Iranian Canadians are fearful about family members still there. For many of them, it feels like no place in Iran is safe, as this war could expand in scope and violence. And getting their loved ones out can be an overwhelming challenge. Joining us now is Iranian Canadian Bahar Mohammedian. And Bahar, your father is Iranian. He was in Canada visiting you and your family, but went back to Iran a few months ago. When's the last time you spoke to him?
I had a conversation with my dad on Monday. That was the direct conversation that I could talk to him on social media. But the last time that I was indirectly talking to him was my brother called him on a phone, and then he was able to call me on another phone, put the phones on the speaker, and I had 2 seconds to tell him how much I love him and how much I miss him, and that he should take care of himself.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how tough that is. And I've heard similar stories from other Canadians with family ties to Iran. As I understand it, where he's staying is close to where some of the bombings have happened. Is that correct?
Well, as far as I know, and obviously I'm just watching the news, it's bombing pretty much around all big cities. And yes, my dad is living in one of the big cities, and it has been a lot of bombing around the area that he lives.
And what do you know about the state of his health?
As far as I know, my dad is fine right now. He was able to give my mom a call last night for a minute or so, and he told my mom that he's doing well. He has hearing issues in general, and he also has knee problems, and that really makes me worried. I'm feeling a little bit better today compared to yesterday, because I heard that he was able to relocate to my uncle's house, which is in another city close to my city. I know that he's now with someone, but it doesn't make it okay for me. I am still worried because he's in a war zone. And so what if something happens around him and he can't hear that? What if people run away and my dad can't? These are all different things that really makes me worried about him. And I'm helpless. I don't know what to do for him from Canada here. And it is very stressful.
Yeah, so he is an Iranian, and he is in Iran, so that probably limits some of the few options that people would have in that country now. Have you looked into the possibility of trying to get him out of Iran?
Well, my dad has a valid Canadian visa. I think it makes it easier. He can just get a ticket and then come here. But the problem is that it's right now, from what I heard, there are no airplanes, and there are neighboring countries of Iran that they do have the option for Canadian citizens to get out of the country, but not for Iranian citizens who have a valid visa. So that's not an option for my dad. So right now, as far as I know, there is no option for my dad to get out of the country.
When you first heard the news last night about the U.S. attack on Iran, the bombings, what was your reaction?
Well, and just to be very honest with you here, For us Iranians and for my generation, we had a nightmare that US is gonna strike Iran one day. We had that nightmare for the past 40 years. And imagine the 40 years nightmare comes true. It's not easy. But just to tell you how I feel about it, I really don't know. I just know that when everything happened, when Israel attacked Iran last week, I went through different stages of emotion. The first stage, which I'm sure I am in that one now, that US struck Iran, it was, I'm shocked. I can't believe this happened. Am I worried? Yes, I am. Can I do anything? No, I'm helpless. Can I talk to my family? No, I can't. I'm so scared that, and this comes to my mind any minute that I think about it. Can I see my dad again? Can I hug him again? I don't know when is the next time that I can see my dad. But this new attacks on Iran really worries all of us, because it makes it more uncertain for all of us, all Iranians around the world. And for me, who has her dad back in Iran, I just want to have him here.
Bahar, I'm sorry for the situation you're in, and I hope you get in touch with your father again soon. Thanks for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you, Ian, for having me today.
Another story we're working on, how a new, more potent and deadly drug, nitazene, is being smuggled into this country. Eric Zito tracks down and makes contact with the online sellers.
These are videos inside overseas drug labs, sent to us from people claiming to produce a synthetic opioid more than 40 times stronger than fentanyl. Check it out. Ready to be smuggled into Canada. And the thing is, all we had to do was respond to ads and posts on social media. And within minutes, we're on the phone with criminals. This is illegal in Canada, right? You know that.
Yeah, I know.
The drug, nitazenes, a deadly opioid that's popping up all over the world.
Nitazene.
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 They're called nitazenes.
I'm seeing people coughing up blood. I'm seeing people dying.
And we're gonna take you inside this emerging crisis. It can kill people, right? I just want you to make sure you know that.
That is a game.
You can watch Eric's full story right here on The National in the coming days. Up next, a high school student's graduation wish comes true.
It's definitely gonna be a big moment I'm gonna remember for a long time. I'll probably remember until I'm old and gray, hopefully.
Why having her horse by her side was so meaningful in our moment. Kenzie Simmons is a high school graduate from St. John, New Brunswick. She's here riding her horse Blondie during her ceremony on Thursday. That horse means a lot to Kenzie, so her family, with some help from the school principal, made sure the pair was together during the important milestone. And tonight, their graduation day makes our moment.
Good girl, you can do it, girl. Good girl, we can do this. It's always been my thing to want to do this for graduation, so thank God for Miss Carr. I got it.
Oh, there's all kinds of people here.
Oh. Kenzie is autistic. She's struggled with school very much, especially the last few years. And her whole world is her horse, and her happy place is the barn. That's when you see her smile. So it was her dream to be able to do this today, never thinking that it ever could happen.
High school and middle school was really rough for me. People were really mean, and it was just like usual bullying, but it's what it is. It's just, yeah. You never know what's going on in their life, so I just kind of ignore it, but it was still really hard when I got home. It's definitely gonna be a big moment I'm gonna remember for a long time. I'll probably remember until I'm old and gray, hopefully. Thank you, Miss Cart. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting this happen. I'm sorry. Happy tears.
That is a sweet story. I was wondering if horses and high school graduation are a thing. I don't know, but when I searched it, I discovered that grad pictures with horses is a thing. There's even a young woman in Western Canada who has tips on how to do it. One of her key tips, budget more time than you think you might need. Thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Ian Hanamansing in Vancouver. I hope you can join me on News Network weeknights at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. Good night.